You want to know why that story makes your skin crawl every single time you hear it. And I'm going to tell you. But first, I need you to think about something. Think about the last time you felt completely safe. Maybe you were home,
final horrifying
doors
truth.
locked, lights
It's been
on,
inside you
familiar
all along.
sounds all around you. And then something small happened. Something tiny. And in that one moment, that feeling of safety just evaporated. That is the exact psychological trap this story sets. And
The
today,
silence was deafening.
we are going
He
to
could
break
feel
it
its
down
eyes on him
completely.
through the screen,
Because
watching,
this is one of the
waiting.
most unsettling horror legends ever told. And most people don't actually understand why it works as well as it does. The story goes like this. A teenage babysitter is watching a couple's young children for the evening. The parents have gone out for dinner, the kids are in bed, and she's downstairs alone. Then the phone rings. She picks it up. A voice on the other end asks her if she's checked on the children. She assumes it's a prank, hangs up, tries to forget about it.
Please, send someone
But the
quickly.
phone rings again.
Something's not right.
Same voice, same question. By the third call, she's terrified enough to contact the police. They tell her to keep the caller talking if he calls
They're coming
again
from
so they can
inside the
trace the
house.
line. He does call again. And when the trace comes back, the officer on the phone says something that changes everything. He tells her the calls are coming from inside the house. She needs to get out immediately. She runs. She escapes. And when police search the home, they find a man hiding upstairs, near the children's rooms. Now on the surface, that sounds like a straightforward thriller. Someone dangerous was hiding in the house. Girl escapes. Case closed. But there is so much more happening underneath that story, and pulling it apart reveals something genuinely fascinating about how fear
Psychological
actually
horror is a
operates in the
subgenre
human
that aims
brain.
to create unease by preying on
Let's
the
start
human
with the
psyche.
location. The house is supposed to be the safe place. In almost every horror framework, the monster lives outside. It lives in the woods, in the dark, across the street, under the water. Home is where you go to escape the monster. This story deliberately inverts that. The threat isn't outside trying to get in. The threat is already inside. And the outside world is where safety actually exists. When you flip that dynamic, you strip away every psychological comfort the audience has. There is nowhere left to retreat to in your
The
mind.
final horrifying
And that is where the
truth.
real horror
It's been
begins.
inside you all along.
Then there is the phone itself. At the time this story originated and circulated most heavily, the telephone was a lifeline. It was how you reached help. It was how the outside world reached you. So when the calls
The
start coming
silence was
in,
deafening.
the
He could
babysitter's
feel its
instinct
eyes
is
on him
completely
through the
reasonable.
screen, watching,
She uses
waiting.
the phone to call for help, but the same device that is supposed to save her is also delivering the threat. The tool of rescue and the tool of terror are identical. That duality is profoundly disturbing on a subconscious level, even if you can't immediately articulate why. Now let's talk about the children. They're asleep upstairs the entire time. They never scream. Nothing audible happens up there. And yet we are told there is someone hovering near them in the dark. The horror of
Please,
something threatening a
send someone
child who
quickly.
doesn't even know they're in
Something's not
danger is almost unbearable to sit with. It taps into one of the most primal protective instincts a human being has. And by keeping
The
the children
calls are-
silent and oblivious,
They're coming from
the story
inside the
forces
house.
all of that anxiety to live entirely in the audience's imagination. Your brain fills in every detail. And your brain is far more creative and far more cruel than any writer. There is also something deeply wrong about the timing in this story that most people overlook. The calls come in stages. First one, then another, then another. Each one tightening the tension. The police get involved. A trace happens. And then the answer arrives. That escalating structure mirrors something called a panic spiral. Each piece of new
Psychological
information
horror
raises
is
the
a
stakes
subgenre
instead of
that aims to
providing
create
relief.
unease by preying on the
Normally,
human psyche.
getting the police involved should feel like a turning point. The cavalry is coming. But here, the moment help arrives is also the moment the worst possible news is delivered. The story takes your hope and uses it as a weapon against you. That is masterful psychological construction, whether the original teller knew it or not. Here's where this gets even more interesting. Folklorists and researchers who study urban legends have traced versions of this story back to at least the 1960s in America. It spread through slumber parties, through school hallways, through late-night conversations.
The final
Before the
horrifying
internet,
truth.
before social
It's been
media,
inside you
this
all
story
along.
traveled entirely through word of mouth. And it survived because it was sticky. Because every single person who heard it felt that cold drop in their stomach and immediately wanted to tell someone else. That is the mark of a genuinely
silence was
effective
deafening.
piece
He
of
could feel its
psychological
eyes on him
horror.
through the
It
screen,
compels you to spread
watching,
it.
waiting.
The story was adapted into films and television multiple times across different decades. Each adaptation updated the setting and the technology while keeping the core intact. Because the core isn't about phones or houses or babysitters specifically. The core is about the violation of a safe space and the discovery that danger was present long before you were aware of it. That concept is timeless. It doesn't matter what era you live in. That fear translates perfectly. There's another layer worth examining. The
Please,
babysitter
send
is a
someone
teenager,
quickly.
usually
Something's not
portrayed as a young woman left alone in a position of responsibility. She's been trusted to protect others. And the discovery that someone has been in the house the entire
The calls
time carries with it
they're
a
coming from
crushing
inside the
undercurrent of
house.
failure, even though she did everything right. She noticed something was wrong. She asked for help. She followed instructions. She got out. And still there's this lingering horror around the question of what could have happened. What the person upstairs was doing during all those hours before the calls began. The story never fully answers that. It doesn't need to. Unanswered questions in horror are almost always scarier than answers. Let's also acknowledge the title of today's video, because it adds another dimension entirely. The babysitter called the parents, but they were already home. That
Psychological
variation
horror
takes
is a
the original
subgenre that
story
aims to create
and twists
unease
it
by
in a
preying
different
on the human
direction.
psyche.
Now the threat isn't a stranger hiding in the house. Now the parents themselves become the unknown variable. Why didn't they announce themselves? Where were they? What were they doing while the babysitter downstairs was terrified? That version of the story turns a home invasion thriller into something closer to psychological horror, with no clean resolution. Because you can't escape parents. You can't call the police on a family. The power dynamic shifts completely, and the walls close in from a different direction. What both versions share is the architecture of betrayal. In the original,
final
the house itself
horrifying
betrays
truth.
you.
It's
In
been
the
inside you
variation,
all along.
the people you trusted betray you. Either way, the story is fundamentally about discovering that the thing protecting you was never protecting you at all. And I think that's why this particular legend has lasted as long as it
The
has.
silence was deafening.
We
He
are
could feel
all,
its eyes
in
on
some
him
way,
through the
that
screen,
babysitter.
watching.
We are all sitting in a house we believe is safe, trusting the walls around us, trusting the people who should have our best interests at heart, trusting that the devices we use to call for help will actually work. This story asks a quiet, devastating question underneath all of its surface-level scares. What if none of that was ever true? What if the danger has been there the whole time? Silent and patient, waiting just upstairs. That question doesn't go away when the story ends.
Please,
It
send
follows
someone
you.
quickly.
It sits in the corner of the
Something's not
room while
right.
you try to sleep. And honestly, that is exactly what the very best horror is supposed to do. If this kind of deep breakdown of horror psychology
calls
is your
are-
thing, there is a
they're
lot
coming from
more
inside
where
the
that came
house.
from on this channel. Stay with me. We are just getting started.